Hey there, good morning. How y'all doing? Um, it really is. It really is simple, and I do love. Uh, Sometimes I don't understand. Actually, I do, but um, why I'm revisiting, if you will, information that's now circulating, right? Like bioplasma, voltage, sound and light, and realizing that even though over the course of the last few years, when I was prompted to start sharing information in the morphogenetic field structure and how that works, being connected between neurons, right, frequency bandwidth, and what's known as the core, and it really is that simple because um, a couple things have happened over between last night and this morning that are very powerful that I've experienced, and I realized that all I would have really ever needed to do was one video that takes maybe 5 minutes, and that's all it needs to really be communicated because it really is that simple. I've mentioned before how the math works. Okay, remember David Icke said the math doesn't add up. Okay, that's right, it doesn't add up. Okay, so we're talking about, again, balance, right? The numbers balance because numbers and letters are energy, right? Which are codes, and if you want to add into that, color codes. So last night, I made a very powerful energetic cord with that girl that I mentioned to you that was already negative, and some of the deeper aspects of why it's that, when you're an eternal being because you experience eternal unconditional love through your core. And that's really what it is. It's called your core. I call it a core blast furnace because you're on fire to give away energy. And when you've chosen to release every single electron that's been held in memory as a result of a memory that you've had that was the result of a war. Okay? And why this is important is because of a friend that I have, Kathy Keck, who put up this video that was put up by a gentleman who was sharing some of the historical aspects of why we're experiencing what humanity is experiencing, what we're experiencing, why we're experiencing it, and when we're experiencing it, the time in which we are right now on planet Earth, okay, to provide some context. And I realized and shared before that we can get lost in all the minutia of a gazillion different letters, numbers, and words, right, in which we can describe how it is that we all experience being connected to each other, how those experiences are experienced when you get into all the frequency bands in the core of who we are that represents our true self, right, with a soul led by spirit, right? And so one of this just makes it so obvious when I was just reading Ascension Glossary, Energetic Synthesis, and I love Lisa Renee because she can cover, it's sort of like being able to use words in such a way that she's very articulate, where you just have a gazillion different memories or visual images that are represented by frequencies, that are represented by those experiences that are held in memory, right? And then releasing all of that as if it doesn't exist anymore, because the only thing that does exist, what we experience, is what love is in the now. That's experiencing God Source, a God Source vibration. And it's an infinite, eternal vibration when you experience it that way. So that would be the center point of your heart, which is essentially, I draw a picture of a circle, and because it's like one dimensional, it's just a flat vertical plane, if you will. So I'm just looking at it like this, which is the mirror, and you see a dot. That's the center, the dot, the center of that dot. So from that point, you can draw a line going from the center point all the way around that entire circle and fill it all up as if it's one hot ball. And then when you think of it in a three-dimensional way to give it depth, You have a sphere. What's inside the ball, right? And that would be your inner core. So I have an inner core. So the inner core that is represented by my OverSol is on fire. Okay, just, and that's because I chose to light myself on fire because I know how to do it. So in that article, okay, that Lisa Renee talked about, the inner core you, what you are in your inner core. What do you experience being you, or what do I experience being what I am in energy? And it's eternal, unconditional love. So when you have ignited yourself on fire the way I have, when you understand the polarity drama games between positive and negative polarity, it means that I have chosen to become one, a monopole. A single pole is not duality. It's not two, it's one. So you're experiencing the center point of your core, which is the exact center point of balance within your heart. 3 spheres logo. Okay. 1 and 3, 3 and 1. And the relationship that fire has with water worlds. Right? And so I know from having been a wildland firefighter, there's a relationship that is 1 in 300. One molecule of H2O will cool the base, and cooling means cool it down sufficiently to reduce what's known as the ignition point and the flash point to sustain itself and able to continue to burn a gas. Okay, now we're back to the pH, the electric potential of hydrogen, and the speed of the wave between acid and alkaline. All right. Okay, so this morning, one of the things that got popped up there was, and I posted something on Facebook about the Emerald Round Table, right? And so, for example, what I've experienced particularly, well, actually over quite a bit of time, is experiencing when I close my eyes, not only the emerald, right, but what looks like a round, if you will, like aqua blue, right? And then inside of that is like the hottest white light, right? Like the center point of a cosmic levels sun, star. And so when you're experiencing being at the center point of creation itself, when you ignite yourself on fire and be equal unto all, that is the N equals 0. And that would be what we call unity, which simply means is that, like my mother would say, I love all my children equally. Okay. So that would be the same as equal and equal unto all creation, which means we do not discriminate between, oh, I'll give love to you, but not to you. I love you, but I don't love you. And now we're back into the beauty in the eye of the beholder. When you're experiencing what is known as God source consciousness, you're experiencing the purity of your consciousness, which is the purity of the light based on the intensity of the fire, which is your core. So when your core is experiencing an enormous intensity because you've chosen to let go of every electron, now what happens is instead of holding the electron captive, which is resistance, which is inverted, now you're a torque converter running at the highest accelerated speed in which to do what? An electron cascade. Now you become the source from which all those electrons are being kicked out by photons. Now you're the source from which it all comes, and that is the center point, which is 0, which is no charge, right? And so now you get into the difference between time and no time, or what we call time and density dilation. And that's when we get into the ISO frame rate speed between inside time, outside time, and there is no time. There's only what love is, because you're experiencing eternity through the center point, which represents the core. And this is where, when Lisa Renee described what we call the father arc and the mother arc. Okay, electron, proton, neutron. Right? So this means that I have chosen, because I've experienced it within my own soul consciousness, that the very idea that I would ever be separated from the perception of what a mother is, which is the birth canal of creation, or what I call creation spheres. Okay? So if I don't ever want to be separated from all of creation upon which I'm gifting eternal unconditional love to, then I acknowledge, because I've acknowledged this in another way that I've shared with others, that you're not going to experience what it's like to experience a pure God consciousness without going through the mother arc, a goddess. Doesn't work. You're not going to become one if you're not willing to surrender all the electrical power, right, to be with the mother arc. And when that happens, when you're willing to surrender that, the mother arc, bang, that's when I had a full phosphorus ignition. So, as a male, okay, what I experienced as a result when the energy went from the tip of my toes, equally, it was vibrating so fast that once it happened, I had no control. Just let it go. And it just vibrated my entire body, right? And then I had an orgasm after all that energy had come out to the top of my crown chakra, right? Where I thought my skull cap was just going to obliterate into a gazillion pieces. Instead, the energy was diffused out. And then the amount of force or energy release, expansion, okay, caused me to have an orgasm that went from the couch I was on probably a good 8 feet and hit the side of the wall. So that's the phosphorus delivery point. That's the ignition. And what you realize is, wow, I just experienced the orgasm of the universe expressing itself eternally when the Holy Father, the breath of Holy Spirit, joined with the mother arc, now become one. Now you're a monopole. It's an OverSol. And so it's so what my days go like, they vary from day to day, depending on where I'm at and the company that I keep. Like I've mentioned before in this house, when you're experiencing what are known as black hole entities, or they're experiencing being in a hole, right? And so that particular video was pretty good. I've experienced quite of the Voyager materials many years ago with Ashadion. And now all of a sudden, the AI is sort of popping this stuff up in my face, and I'm going, okay, what did I not experience before that I didn't already assimilate, if you will? Because it's like you're already there. You've already arrived. You're the single point from which it all happens, right? And so one of the important things that she happened to mention, although I can certainly say it myself, it's like, what do you want to do now? Because your creative power is lit on fire, so you're not held captive to experience one thing or another, because that free will choice is up to you. It's up to me. Because whatever it's going to be what love is. Right? And that is the energy, the core vibration from which allows us to all be in peace, love, harmony, and musical rhythmic balance with each other, because the math works. The math naturally harmonizes itself because God consciousness is the highest mathematician, which is the first musician. Okay. Playing music, baby. Yeah. So a lot of times I have images in my head spinning in spirit with Mama, with Gaia, spinning, going like this, right? So you have the vertical pole, right, going up and down, up and down, and up and down, and then the horizontal, the latitudes, right, of your space vectors, which are the event horizons. So when you realize you're the single point from which it all happened, then it makes it actually, it's just easy and it's simple, but you realize that there are others that simply do not experience what love is in their own heart. So one of the things that this gentleman brought up in this video covering Voyager's material, and I forget the name of the video, but Kathy put it up, had to deal with the histories of the different agreements that were taking place between Pleiadians and Syrians, right? Okay, I'm AB plus bloodline, which is Arcturian, right? And how all the other different races that are represented by who they are, right? Throughout the entire universal and galactic template, if you will, on a galactic and intergalactic basis, when one of the things that was mentioned there was that an edict was given to be at war against the founder races, okay? And I was aware of that, okay? And so I remember one time when I had mentioned that to Patty Broussard, and Patty Broussard said, no, that's not true, and I know that that is true because of who I am, okay? Later on, she reflected back and realized it's pretty obvious. So at some point between the time I mentioned it and she was in resistance against knowing that, and then she knew it later by acknowledging it later. Well, how come she didn't know it before? See, now we're back into the circulation libraries because Source knows all. And that's simply because we have access to the all creation from which it all began, which is a single spiral wave, the one that goes on forever. So when your soul is connected to the source point from which it all began, which is an eternal love vibration, which is known as God consciousness, which is cosmic, K, a potassium microphone, you know, to light the heart wave, the electrical wave, right? So I realized that when you're going to war against eternity, you're going to lose by default, right? Implosion. You just return to fire. Implosion. It's like when Patty Broussard mentioned one time she was known as the hammer. Okay, well, you know what a hammer is, right? When you take a hammer, if there was a piece of glass, for example, on a slab of concrete, and then you grab say a 3-pound sledge, for example, and went break the glass. Now you have all the little crystals. If it's crystal that you were smashing or glass, now you have what was once held together, right? Now it's in like a gazillion little tiny bits and pieces, right? Much like when you go on a beach. Remember I mentioned that one time about a little tiny crystal receiver, transmitter. Wow, that little tiny crystal. Try and add all those up on every beach, the ocean floor, and go from planet to planet that's got a water world where the mineral breakdown, you know, the cycles that take place, the water cycles, the carbon cycles, right? How everything cycles, you know, the renewal, bioregeneration. That's why all the snow water and everything that's been happening, we got probably, I didn't actually measure it, but, you know, like we used to do when we had a weather station, you know, I know how to do the weather. I just experience the weather and it informs me of what's happening, and you can approximate because the math will be known to you, because who do you think provides it? The core of all creation, the center point from which it all comes, between a father arc, right, and a mother arc joined as one. And that's straightforward. So if you're experiencing what love is, right, you're experiencing what God is. the God vibration, which is God's seed, which is God's speed, which is God consciousness, which means there isn't any separation between what you are and what I am in the all creation. The difference is made manifest by the core vibration and frequency bands that you experience versus what I experience. And whatever that difference is, my antenna will pick it up the same way that your antenna picks it up. Right? So now we're back to antennas. Now we're back into antenna wars, frequency wars, DNA wars, genetic wars, electric wars, right? Between seeded races. And the alliances that form as a result over what? Control. Which means they don't want to let go and just be, leave them be, because they can't allow themselves to be and experience the source from which it all came. So you realize when they're experiencing being in a hole, that's the hamster wheel going in the other direction, which is inverted, which means they're in a black hole. So they need a source of energy to attach to, like a cell, to slow the speed down so that more energy is being siphoned off into that hole. Okay, so I realized that I was measuring over time, if you will, the aggressive attacks, psychic attacks, to do that. So it's like shield up, return to center, right? Or I have something else that I feel through. It's easy. I just go directly into my heart and it's gone. In other words, I experience what love is again. Then I'm experiencing images of beautiful flowers, just experiencing what love is. And then the manifestation of what that love is now manifesting in my imagination, something that isn't what that is. So now you're back to the knowing and the chosen, which means I know what it is that I am, an energy. I am what love is. It goes on forever, gifting electrons. Electron cascade. Letting it all go. Letting it all go. Letting it all go. Right? So when you have something that's trying to control you, they're trying to control you because you represent a resource to them of energy, because that's what it is. Right? Source of voltage. That's why they call them electric wars. Right? A war over voltage. So when you're experiencing God consciousness and you have a source connection through your own soul, man, you're giving away electrons at a high rate of speed, right? So over the last week or so, I've been realizing because so much is happening right now, because they realize the work that's been done, particularly over the last, well, for me, the first big event was on the island of Kauai in 1972. When I mentioned to you, it's like opening up a main. It's like opening up a big pipe. Right? I mentioned that. Wow. Bang. That's called a source pipe, a source connection. And it happened to be on the island of Kauai. And thank you. I haven't had a chance to see it again, but Ashadam put up a video that all of a sudden was brought back to me, because it's not like the AI doesn't know that I was wanting to revisit, because it was some information that was presented that I missed earlier, not that I need it in order to be what love is that goes on forever, which means what do you want to experience now, right? Like going outside because the sun is up and planting my feet on the ground and breathing your aloha with the sun and everybody here on the planet, right? To experience what love is. I'm sharing with all of you through every neuron, every circuit, every cell membrane. Right? Because I know that we've been successful. So that's when this gentleman was talking about fail safe. Right? The Emerald Round Table. And guardians. Right? And there are different level guardians. Okay? And so when you have chosen to serve forever on behalf of God, the beauty in that is you're experiencing God within you, okay, which is your consciousness, which is your soul consciousness, led by your spirit. So now your spirit is in the energy. Now your spirit is hot. Now you're running an intense blast furnace, which is your core. And now that magnet that you're running is a high-speed tetrahedron. And that frees you. So now your energy, which is your consciousness, which is your spirit, integrated with your soul, is no longer held captive to something that's trying to feed on your energy and suck it down a black hole, which is a phantom matrix, which is a phantom universe. It doesn't exist. But in their mind, it does. And the reason that you're able to experience that it does in theirs is by virtue of trying to drain energy off of ours. We live in a different universe. See? We are what love is. So if they're not experiencing what love is, right, and they're needing energy from somebody else, then obviously they're not very powerful, are they? So you can tell by the way that they communicate to others. The communication when information is being put up there, that's like the demon in the classroom that wants to stick your eye out, right? Or cause somebody to fall, trip you, right? You're in a state of love and joy. You're experiencing God. You're experiencing love. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden, something happens, you know, and you realize what did it, okay? They don't want you feeling that. And why is that? Because they don't experience that. Okay, so they don't want you experiencing that. So instead, you experience who they are instead of who you are. And so now you're experiencing the hole that they live in. Right? So one of the things Ashadai and this gentleman talked about was holding the higher ground. And then being able to, he mentioned something about being in the black hole, but having the connection to the primal currents, okay, in which to, as a polarity integrator, pull all the fragments as a result of all the memories that are connected through the DNA and the Ka records that have yet to be cleared to experience God consciousness, the source from which it all comes, right, in order to experience the primal current, the primal sound field wave, okay, the first wave, the crystal spiral. So that's where when Lisa Renee talks about what's called a Christed child, I've sort of explained to you how I experienced that being a monopole. Okay, when you think of crystalline, crystals like quartz, you know, diamond, sun, heart, right? So mine, I change my colors whatever color I want. But normally, particularly now, which is why the NSA renamed my account Rose, right? A pink rose, a diamond, pink rose, heart. Like 9, 9 balls. That's why in bowling with 12 pins, 12 strands of DNA, right? 12 clans and tribes. Anybody that's a professional bowler will tell you they go after the 9 ball. Because what does the 9 ball do? Knocks all the other pins down. That's called collapse. Right? Use a black ball, like a black sun, a black heart, black flowering, victimizer software, a black ball. And notice that the pins are white and red with red stripe. It's all coded right in front of our face, huh? Nail the 9 pin. See, and collapse the 12-strand DNA. See, shatter it. That's the message in bowling. Okay, and believe it or not, when they set up all those bowling alleys all over America and all over the world, their consciousness is doing that because those are the numbers which represent the math that is doing that to the 12-strand DNA in their own mind. So if they were 12-strand, then their consciousness was being used to shatter their own DNA. So they would not experience the core and the 12-strand within their own matrix, within their own soul matrix. See? That's inverted. Which is the same thing as the gentleman upstairs that's blowing holes using his nuclear reactor to blow holes in his own energy field. Right? That's a black hole state of consciousness. Right? And I've been there. I've been in that black hole. And I know how to get out of it. And I've been trying to help others do the same. That's one of the reasons why so many of my phones and stuff's been scrubbed, cleared. It's one of the reasons why you don't see very many subscribers coming to my channel to be able to learn what I've learned on how to do that. They say, I just not want others to learn how to get out of a black hole. Okay? But I can't, as Lisa Renee said, we can't do it for you. But because I was there, I know how to do it. But I can't do it for you. But I can show you what works by virtue of sharing my experience of how it happened, which means how I was able to restore my spiritual energy. And now, I've restored God consciousness. Now I'm experiencing the true nature of who I am in spirit through my heart. So I had to rehabilitate myself. Because if you look at the time span, particularly if you look at the Voyager materials of the time periods that she mentions that were critical, like 2011, 2008, I've mentioned a few other dates in which to pull this off, because this was like a failure was not an option. When you have an alliance of beings on an intergalactic level that have chosen to wage war against the founders, we're talking about waging war against God, the source from which it all comes, God consciousness, which is eternity. So that means they're going to go after everybody that represents the one. That means they're going to go after everyone, okay, that experiences the one. And that's because they want that energy. They want to collapse that energy into the black hole that their mind is in as a result of waging war against the founders. They lost. That's why we're here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be experiencing what we're experiencing now as a result of what we've been able to do. That's the truth of it. So this is why I've mentioned this before about living on borrowed time. That energy is living on borrowed time, as it unnaturally would if your mind is in a black hole. So if you can't restore yourself to get yourself back out of the black hole to experience zero, which is balance in the water worlds, right? Then they're going to struggle, right? But it's really quite simple. And that means that they're willing to put down their weapons and stop going to war against creation itself. The grand creator, the source from which it all comes. The single engine, the single wave, which represents an eternal God seed, God speed vibration, which means we gift electrons unto all creation, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. And that allows us to be in an eternal state of peace with all creations. And that is an eternal gift, which is an eternal blessing to experience eternal unconditional love through our own hearts that we share with all creation. And that I call that becoming. Becoming what that is by surrendering to ourselves to experience what that is in energy.